All right, here we are studying now a new article, Article 2. This one is about the president, the executive branch. So let's study this. I think there'll be a few things in here that surprise you, especially how presidents were supposed to be elected. It is a little bit different now, and we'll see there's an amendment that changed that. So let's start reading, and we'll go through and figure out what the president's supposed to do. So we have here the executive power shall be vested in the president. What does executive mean? Well, you should know that. It comes from the same word as execute. So the executive power is to carry out the laws. The legislative branch or the two Congresses make the laws, but the executive branch carries it out. They're the ones in charge of making the laws happen. So the executive power, in other words, the power to make the laws happen, to enforce the laws, shall be vested in the President of the United States of America. So one person, it's the President that has that, of the United States of America. He shall hold his office during a term of 4 years. So how does that compare to the others? Remember that senators are 6 years, representatives are 2, and the president here is 4. So that's kind of a, 2, 4, 6. There's one of each there. And together with the vice president chosen for the same term be elected as follows. So the vice president serves with him. The term of the vice president and the term of the president go together. So this is how they're supposed to be elected. Now notice this top part right here has not been changed by an amendment, but all this stuff that we read right here has been changed by an amendment. So let's read it. So each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors. So the state legislatures, let me change colors here just to make our life a little bit more fun, huh? The state legislatures get to decide how to choose a number of electors. So they get to choose the electors. How many do they get? They get to choose one equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled to Congress. So everybody has how many senators? Each state has 2 senators. But then how many representatives do they have? Well, it changes depending on how big the state is. Some states may have more, some states may have less. So for instance, if a state has 5 representatives, that means they have 5 representatives and 2 senators. So how many do they get? They get 7 votes total. If, for instance, they have 2 representatives and 2 senators, then they get 4. Makes sense, right? So that's pretty clear on how you determine how many votes a state gets. And that's still true. So every state gets a different amount of votes, depending on how many representatives they have. So no senator or representative or person holding an office of trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed an elector. So in other words, nobody already working for the government can be an elector. These have to be, what they wanted was, normal, good old-fashioned normal citizens. They didn't want politicians doing this. So here is how they were supposed to be elected, or at least how the Constitution originally had presidents being elected. So the electors from each state shall meet in their respective states. So all the electors from that state get together and they vote by ballot for 2 persons, of whom one of least shall not lie an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. And then they shall make a list of all the persons voted for and the number of votes for each. So they get together here. Let's do this over here. Let's give ourselves some room. So each state, let's just say, I'm going to make up my own crazy country called the United States of this lesson. There's the state, there's the country, and here's some state boundaries. There are 4 different states. See, here's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just making this up. Now, this is how it works. For the United States of America, obviously there were more states, but let's just say how it states. So well, I'm not making a lot of sense. Let's just pretend there are only 4 states and see how this works. Whew, hopefully I can explain this well. So all in state 2, all the electors get together. Let's say state 2 has 7 electors, state 1 has 3, state 4 has 10, and state 3 has 5 electors. We just made that up. That's how many electors they have. So they all get together and they vote. Each elector gets 2 votes. All right? Because it says here, then vote by ballot for 2 persons. So each elector gets 2. Oh, I don't think you saw that. So each elector votes for 2 people. So for instance, in state 2 here, they're going to vote for, there's going to be 14 votes there, and there's going to be 10 votes here, and 20 votes here, and 6 votes here, because they each get a vote for 2. Now, it does also say that if they're voting in this state, they can choose, if they would like to, someone from their state for one of their votes, but for the other vote, it has to be someone from another state. So they can't vote for 2 people from their own state. One of them can be from their state if they'd like, and the other ones have to be from another state. So they didn't want people just only voting for people from their state. So they would get together and vote those. And then they make a list of all the people that they voted for. All the votes. So they would say, for instance, this one right here, if there were 14 votes, they might say that we had, 6 votes for Joe, and we had another 3 votes for Bill, and what is that, 9? There's 14, and another 5 votes for Herman. So they would make a list of how many people got what votes in that state. Now notice that there's nobody running for president. There's no like, I'm voting Republican, I'm voting Democrat. They just vote for people they think might be good. They just choose people that they think might be good for president. They can talk about it and decide and vote. So let's see what happens to it then. So after they take that vote, they make a list of who got votes for each, how many votes there were, which list they shall sign and certify, so they have to sign it, and transmit sealed, so they have to seal it, to the seat of government of the United States, directed to the President of the Senate. It's the Senate that takes care of this. The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and the House, so both Congresses meet together, they open all the letters they get, they open all the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. So they count up all the votes from all the different states. So they get, here's the one from this state, but then there's also a list of votes from this state, and a list of votes from this state, and a list of votes from this state. So they get all of these letters together, and they open it to the Senate. They take it to the Senate. The President of the Senate opens them and counts them of who got votes. So that's what happens. Then, let's see. And then shall be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes shall be the president, if such a number be a majority. What does a majority mean? A majority means that it's at least 50%. So if they have at least 50%, then they get to be the president of the whole electors appointed. And if there be more than one that have a majority, so in other words, if there's a tie between 2 people, if 2 people both have 50%, and have an equal number of votes, then the House of Representatives shall immediately choose by ballot one of them for president. So it's the House that gets to break the tie. So the Senate counts it, but the House breaks the tie. Let's see, and so that's if somebody gets a majority. Now, if you look at this, really, it's not very likely that somebody's going to have a majority because they're all voting for so many people. It's likely that they're going to have, somebody has 10 votes and somebody has 12 votes and somebody has 6 votes and somebody has 4 votes and somebody may have 2 or 1 and somebody else may have 11. So nobody here got more than nobody on this list, if this were the vote count. Got more than 50%. That's what would probably happen. So what do you do if nobody gets 50%? Well, let's read here. If no one gets 50%, and if no person have a majority, then from the 5 highest, so they take the 5 highest votes on the list. So these are the top 5 people that got votes. From the 5 highest on the list, the House, again, it's the House that gets to choose. Remember, it's the House that got to break this tie too. The House shall in like manner choose the President. So, in other words, the House will take the top 5 people. So if these were our votes again, what's our top 5 people? Let's see. Well, here's the highest. 2, 3, 4, 5. There's our top 5. So this person and this person who only got 2 wrong votes, they don't even count. They just cross those people out. Here's the top 5 highest people. And then the House votes on them. So the House talks about these 5 people, and they vote, and they actually keep voting and keep arguing until somebody gets at least 50% of the vote. When that person gets 50% of the vote, they become president. Yay. So if there's nobody gets a majority from the electors, then the House chooses. So the House shall choose in like manner. Like manner just means it with the same vote. So choose the president. But in choosing the president, the vote shall be taken by the states, the representation from each state having 1 vote. So the House, even though the House may have, like let's say Utah has 3 representatives, even though Utah has 3 representatives, for a presidential vote in the House, they only get 1 vote. Every state only gets 1 vote. So each state just gets 1 vote. So those 3 people have to get together and decide who they're going to vote for together. They get 1 vote. A quorum for this purpose shall consist of members from 2/3 of the states, so at least 2/3 of the states have to be representative there for them to take this vote. And a majority of all the states shall be necessary in the choice. So even though there's only 2/3 of the people there, so let's say, there's 50 states right now, even though only 2/3 of the states were present, they could take the vote, but still at least 25 of them have to vote for them to choose a president. So they have to get at least votes from 50% of the states. In every case, after the choice of president, the person having the greatest number of votes of the electors shall be the vice president. So this next, they take the vote. Whoever has the most votes is the president. Whoever has the second most votes is the vice president. But if there should remain 2 or more who have equal votes, in other words, there's a tie for vice president, then the Senate gets to choose by a ballot for the vice president. So, let's try to quickly make this maybe slightly less confusing. Let's give ourselves, we'll squish that way down. So again, how does somebody become president? The state electors, let's add the E to that. The state electors vote first. And if they get 50%, that's a president. Next, if that doesn't work, they take the top 5 and they do elections in the House. And they have to keep doing it until there's 50%. That's how they do it. For vice president, the next highest votes is the VP. If there's a tie, where does it go? It goes to the Senate. Ooh, that's really messy, but hopefully you understand that. So that's how it was designed. But notice that there's nowhere in here that says that there's parties or that there's somebody running for president. And that's why it was designed this way. It was designed so that people would choose people to be the president who maybe didn't want to be president, but they were good. They weren't people seeking for power. They weren't people who wanted to control the country. They just were good people. So this is how we get people like George Washington. George Washington would never be elected president today because, number one, he didn't want to run. He didn't want to be president. But the people knew what a leader he was, and the people said, no, we kind of call you. We are asking you to be our president. We're voting for you. So that's how it was back then. It was designed so that people who didn't necessarily want to be president would be president. And for those, and not necessarily to find out the person who was running or the one who was trying to spend the most money or gain the most power. That's why it was done that way. Now, obviously, it's not done that way anymore. It says right here, this clause was superseded by the 12th Amendment of the Constitution. When we read the amendments, you'll see that this did get changed. It's not done like this anymore. But that's how it was originally designed to vote for president, is that people would get together and say, who do we want to be our president? From each state, they would choose people not running for president necessarily, not people who wanted to be president, but people that they thought would be good. Which I think is really interesting, and in some ways kind of sad that we don't do it that way anymore, because now we just have presidents that are running for power, trying to become president, which could be a good thing or could be a bad thing, but, it was kind of nice that back then people like George Washington, who didn't want to be president, but were excellent leaders, could be called by the people to come be their president. So let's read the last little part of this. It says Congress may determine the time of choosing electors on the day, so they get to decide when votes happen. The Congress gets to decide when votes happen. That's not too big of a deal. We do them in November now. Now here's the requirements. The requirements to be president. No person except a natural-born citizen. Now remember, if you're a senator or a representative, you can't be an immigrant. But to be president, you have to be a natural-born citizen. You can't be an immigrant. A natural-born citizen. This is why, there are people who are complaining, thinking Obama was not born in the United States, that he wasn't a natural-born citizen. However, it seems that there's a birth certificate in Hawaii, and he was. But no person except a natural-born citizen. You can't be an immigrant. Or a citizen of the United States at the adoption of this Constitution, which means that, everybody, before the United States was a country, everybody was an immigrant. So back then, you could still be president if you were a citizen of the United States when the Constitution was made. Shall be eligible for president. So they have to be a natural-born citizen. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not attain the age of 35 years. They have to be 35 years old. And they have to at least live in the United States for the past, or for 14 years. So they can go live in other countries. For instance, President Obama lived in another country for quite a while. But they have to be 14 years living in the country. So natural-born citizen, 35 years old, and at least 14 years a resident. And they serve for 4 years when they're voted on. Now this last part, or let's see, not this last part, but this part, again, this one is superseded by an amendment, 25th Amendment here. But this has to do with what happens if they need a new president. So in case of removal of the president from office, or his death or resignation, or inability to discharge the powers and duties of said office, the same shall devolve to the vice president. So the vice president becomes president if the president can't do the job. And Congress may by law provide for the case, removal, death, resignation, or inability of both the vice president or president and vice president, declaring what officer shall then act as president, and such officer shall act according to until the disability be removed or president shall be elected. So this is how they picked a new president, and this is kind of clear. They did the 25th Amendment just to make sure that this was a little bit more clear exactly how this should happen. It's not too much different now, but there are some particulars, and when we read the amendments, you'll look at those. The president does get paid. So the president shall in all times receive services, or receive for his services a compensation, so he does get paid. But which shall neither be increased nor diminished during the period for which he shall have been elected. So the president can't get a raise or a pay cut while he's the president. It's the same for his whole time. And he now shall not receive within that period any other emolument from the United States or any of them. So he can't get any other money from the United States, only his payment for president, which cannot go up or go down while he's the president. Now, before he enter the execution of his office, so before he becomes the president, he shall take the following oath or affirmation, and this is actually dictated by the Constitution here. This is what they swear. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States. So that's one of their things, faithfully execute the office, and will do my best of my ability to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Now it's traditional now that they also add the so help me God at the end of that, but that's not dictated by the Constitution. It's just traditional. So there is the office of the president. Make sure you understand the old way of electing presidents, because we'll have some quiz stuff on that. It's a little bit different now. We'll get to that when we get to the amendments, but that is the basics of the president office.